an escape artist, he performed a host of death-defying challenges from being buried alive to hazardous underwater escapes. Those performances inspired the character Mr. Miracle, and according to Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist Michael Chabon, he was the man upon which the protagonist of The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay was based. Wizard magazine, the late great publication, credited Steranko as the 5th most influential comics artist in the history of form. During that time, he generated more than 150 original storytelling innovations that changed the direction of the comics medium. As an illustrator, he set what might be a world's record for visualizing more classic fictional heroic characters than any other artist, in addition to producing a multitude of movie posters, record albums, and magazine cover paintings. His international newsstand entertainment magazine Preview had an impressive 25-year run, and was the forerunner of similar titles such as Premiere, Movie Line, and Entertainment Weekly. As its editor, Steranko conducted hundreds of superstar interviews and penned more than 3 million words for the publication. And it goes on. It's amazing. He has collaborated with such top filmmakers as George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, created the look of Indiana Jones, and the initial production illustrations for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Steranko was among the first to be hired by Francis Ford Coppola for Bram Stoker's Dracula, on which he was the film's project conceptualist, and served in a similar capacity for 3 other of the director's projects. In 1974, he created Red Tide, the first modern graphic novel, predating Will Eisner's Contract with God. How many of you read Red Tide, just out of curiosity? Okay. You should track it down, definitely worth your time. Steranko's won numerous awards in both Europe and America, lectured on popular culture, exhibited his work at more than 300 international exhibitions, including the Louvre in Paris. He scripted for Warner Brothers' Justice League TV series, served as a creative consultant for the History Channel's recent 2-hour documentary, Comic Book Superheroes Unmasked. And if you saw that, you'll notice he stole the show. His season 1 Shield TV reviews for The Hollywood Reporter occasionally listed more hits than any other feature. He's shaken up Twitter with his innovative TNT technique, and he's currently prepping an evening with Steranko for live theatrical venues across the country. And he's still the best dressed man in comics. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one, the only, Jim Steranko.
First time, and big wow. My first time, big wow. When I'm flying here, I'm thinking, what the hell ever happened to like little wow? or even average wow? You know, where did they go? By the way, Andrew, when you do that again, would you make it sound like I can hold a job?
I could have kept going, but you know, I didn't want to take the whole hour.
I guess we're going to talk about comics and film and pop culture today, and we'll field a couple of questions later on. But let's start with, well, your choice, Andrew.
All right. You mentioned ability to hold down a job, so let's start at the beginning. What's the first paycheck you ever got?
That's a tough one. By the way, can somebody bring me a bottle of water? I mean, I didn't even drink today. Bottle of water. Someone, please. My first paycheck. Well, when I was 9 years old, I started working in, thank you so much, amigo. You're the best. I started working in carnivals, sideshows. And among the earliest jobs that I did there, I set up cigarette packs and things in the shooting gallery. Another year, do you know the meaning of the term stick? You know what a stick is? A shill? That's somebody who works for the concessionaires. He's on the concessionaire's payroll. So when I was about 10, 11 years old, I would play at these Carney games. There's one in particular that I spent a lot of time at, which was roulette wheel. And I can tell you this, every Carney game is rigged. Like you didn't know that. And this is the way it went. There were raw wooden planks, 3 raw wooden unpainted planks on sawhorses. And on top of the planks was a felt cloth with numbers on them. They're like roulette wheel numbers, okay? Over to the right, there was a post. And on the post was a roulette wheel. And after the crowd would put their bets down, whatever that would be, you know, from nickels to dollars, the concessionaire would spin the wheel, and, you know, whatever that wheel stopped at would be the winning number. Well, as the shill, as the stick, and especially as a 10-year-old kid, completely unsuspecting, you know, if I looked like a Carney guy, you know, that would be, well, a little suspicious. But I didn't. I was one of them. I was one of the Johns. And wherever I would put, like a dime, a quarter, and I'd usually play 2 or 3 numbers at once, believe it or not, that's where the roulette wheel would stop. Every single time. I mean, in the course of an entire day, not a single dime went across that counter to any of the Johns. When you go to Carnival, you can't expect to beat these guys. These are the pros. You don't beat the pros. You know, you don't get in the ring and beat Mike Tyson. It just doesn't happen, right? Well, one of the things I learned, and this is even better than my paycheck, Andrew, I learned this beautiful thing. Bear with me for a moment. In all of our lives, and sometimes far too often, we get to meet people who let us know how damn smart, savvy they really are, how clever they are. They can outsmart us and anybody. You know these guys? Bob Kane was one of those guys. Another story. Don't stop. But in this case, at Carney time, there were people that came up and they saw this kid, this dumb kid, winning dollars, putting down dimes and winning dollars. And the thing that's going through their head is, hey, if this stupid kid can win, I can win. This is where I learned this beautiful thing about people who are so smart, they outsmart themselves. I love it. That was my big Carney paycheck. So I've always been kind of engaged in the entertainment field, but you know, from the time that I was a kid, including some of those things that Andrew talked about earlier. Where should we go next, Andrew?
Okay, so that's the
my first paycheck.
You know, I don't know about the rest of you. I don't mind if we don't get your comments. There's,
We could do that.
But you know, I was a huge Mr. Miracle fan growing up, and we've seen photos of you in your escape artist days. And how many of you know a real live escape artist? Not very many. I think we'd all love to hear.
Not too many. You know me now.
Yeah.
I'm on your Z list.
How does one get into that line of work?
Yeah, interesting question. With great difficulty, Mr. Bones. My father was an amateur magician, and Does anybody here do magic? Know about magic? Yeah, a couple of people, okay. Back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and maybe even now, maybe they're still producing them, there was a magic course called the Tarbell course, right? Tarbell. And my father took that course. It was, I think there were 60 lessons. They came one a week or one every couple of weeks. And he invested a certain amount of time in learning magic and performing it, and, you know, especially for the kids. And I think it was kind of in my blood. Now, in the real magic tradition, you know when the folks would go away, I'd dig out the Tarbell course that was hidden in a closet way behind everything else. And I began to read it. Along the way, I discovered Houdini, who you all know. And you know, this is so interesting. The 20th century is so riddled with important personalities. I wouldn't be surprised if Houdini, all over the world, was as famous as almost anybody else you can name except Christ. Houdini died in 1926, and yet his name is still with us. That's amazing. Well, I was pretty impressed as a kid, and I began to investigate. And back in those days, there was very, very little about escape magic. So in much the same way that I did later in my life, and I'm still doing, I made it up as I went along. And again, like Indiana Jones did. Remember that line? Making it up as it goes along. For example, I never had an art lesson in my life. If I knew what the hell I was doing, I'd be a really dangerous guy. But I thought, when I was a kid and I began to read about Houdini, I read a book on Houdini's life, I thought that I might have some qualities to be able to do that kind of thing. For example, I was very flexible as a kid. In school, I was an acrobat. My specialty was the flying rings, parallel bars. And I had pretty decent upper body strength. I had a high threshold for pain. And I mention that because the escape work that I did was real. In other words, I didn't go down to the magic shop and buy a trick straitjacket for $49.95. My straitjacket came from the State Mental Hospital, and it's stamped right on the chest. State Mental Hospital. They gave it to me because I did a benefit for them one time. And they gave me the jacket that I escaped from. So all my escapes were real. And I've got documentation from police, state police, detectives, that the stunts that I did were authentic. And that's why I mentioned this higher threshold for pain, because some of these things were really tough. For example, like hanging by your wrists in handcuffs. That's metal cutting right into your wrists. That hurts. Yeah, I did a lot of strange stuff in those days, and I am literally covered with scars from head to foot. And if any of you ladies would like to see them,